Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's California State Library webinar hosted by InfoPeople. This webinar is part of the Mental Health Initiative series where compassion meets action. This project was supported in whole or in part by the U.S. Institute of Museum and Library Services under the provisions of the Library Services and Technology Act, administered in California by the state librarian. Today's topic is preventing and treating compassion fatigue with self-care. And our presenter is Katie Scherrer. Katie is the owner of Connected Communities and founder of Stories, Songs, and Stretches, which trains participants to use yoga-inspired movement to support early learning. And I am now happy to turn the webinar over to Katie Scherrer.
Thank you so much, Mary. And thank you for the opportunity to be here to talk with you all today. I think this is a super important topic, so I'm glad that we're naming it and spending a little bit of time unpacking it together. As Mary mentioned, my name is Katie Scherrer, and I am a library consultant as well as a registered yoga teacher. And I've been a mindfulness practitioner for a little over a decade at this point. So I do mindfulness coaching with people and with organizations as well. So that's just kind of a little bit of what I'm bringing to the table. So let's talk about what it's like to be a librarian in 2019. So with any profession, right, there's things that people think that we do, and then the reality of what we really do all day. And the two don't always correspond one-to-one. So, people tend to think that librarianship must be a very low-stress job. It must be so quiet. It must be, just so relaxing of a profession or fun of a profession. And certainly there are days like that. And, maybe that is our experience most of the time, and that's great. But there are a lot of stressors in our work as well that people may not necessarily think about, or that maybe have been kind of surprising to us to discover as we've moved along in our careers. So we may spend a lot of our time advocating for the value and for the funding that we need. There may be battles that we have to take on between various city departments or state departments. There's a lot of politics that can be involved depending on where we're at and what it is that we're doing. If we're in management, we know that sometimes management work is a little bit like therapy, right? You got to unpack what's going on with all your different employees and find ways to motivate them to have different kinds of performance. And then, of course, there's all the things that come into the library by way of the folks who come to use the library. And so all of the challenges and stressors that they bring with them. So throughout the webinar today, we'll have a couple of opportunities to just pause and have a little bit of virtual group discussion. So you'll use the questions pane in your control panel. And the first question is, what is your main source of workplace stress? So we aren't going to connect these to individual people. Mary's just going to read these out as they come in anonymously. So just kind of getting an idea of what are some of the stressors that people are experiencing in their workplace. So you can just type that in. Mary, do we have anything coming in?
Nothing. Oh, here we go. Being pulled in a million directions.
Yeah.
Staff creating drama.
Yeah. Systems operated by people have the same problems that individual people have, right? See if we can get one more.
Dealing with people.
Yeah. So it definitely sounds like the interactions that we have around people, whether that's from the public or from our coworkers, can really be challenging for a lot of us. So let me go back here. So now that we have taken a second to identify some of our common stressors, let's move away from that and come back into the present moment with a very brief mindfulness practice. So however you are right now, if it's available to you, I would like to encourage everyone to just find a way that you can sit comfortably. If you're not sitting and need to be standing, that's fine. You can do that. What we're looking for is to allow our spine to be nice and tall. So if you are sitting down, just uncrossing the legs, letting the feet find the floor, and scooting forward a bit on your chair so that your back isn't slumping into the backrest, but can be nice and tall. And if it feels okay to you, just allow your eyes to softly close. Allow your shoulders to relax. And the way that we're going to share mindfulness and come into the present moment right now is through a sound practice. So I'm going to ring a bell, and you're invited to just listen to the sound of the bell all the way through to the very end till you can't hear any more sound, and then just blink open your eyes. So coming back to our topic, trauma is, if to understand compassion fatigue, which is our main topic that we're going to be discussing today, it's really helpful to first have a little bit of an understanding of trauma. It's a stressor that we haven't really been talking about a whole lot in libraries up until now, but that has a real impact on our work. So let's first just kind of get an understanding of what trauma is. The definition that I like the best is a threat to the system in a state of helplessness. So anything that is threatening our well-being, our system, when we are powerless, we're helpless to the situation. So many different kinds of things can be experienced as trauma. So it's not really so much about the severity of any one individual event, but trauma is this response to the stressful situation that really keeps the person from being able to process what's happened, and cope and move forward. So there's a lot of different things that any human person can experience as trauma, as we can see here on this list. Some kinds of trauma may be things that happen, in one experience. Other kinds of trauma are cumulative. They happen repeatedly over time. And so looking at this list, we can think about some of the folks who are coming in and using our library and some of the experiences that they're bringing with them that we may or may not be aware of, some of the things that are happening in our communities that we may or may not be aware of. And so trauma has a real effect on the brain. And there's a lot to this. So this isn't going to be a super deep explanation, but this is just going to give us a little bit of a surface understanding of what happens in the brain when we experience trauma. So part of our limbic system, which is sometimes referred to as the old brain or the animal brain, it's the part of our brain that is really responsible for survival, is called the amygdala. So our amygdala remembers it. Anything that happens to us that is traumatic, anything that happens to us that threatens our survival. And the amygdala makes very, very loose sensory connections when something happens that is a threat to us. So anything that's in the sensory environment at the time of something dangerous that happens, it takes a little snapshot of that and it remembers it forever, even if we don't remember it at the level of conscious thought. So all of our perception goes first through the limbic system. So before we are even consciously aware of anything that's happening, it's already gone through the limbic system, and our amygdala has already scanned it to see if there is anything in a sensory level that is familiar or reminds it of dangerous things that have happened to us in the past. This all happens immediately, split second, before anything that we're experiencing in our perception rises to the level of conscious thought. When something triggers the amygdala, when it says, oh, this is like that other dangerous, threatening thing that has happened in the past, then the limbic system takes over. Survival mode takes over in the present moment. And so that means that our prefrontal cortex, which is the more evolved part of our brain, the new brain, it's sometimes called, is not functioning. So our ability to reason, to consider consequences, to make good decisions, all of that kind of stuff, that is obliterated, and the brain is locked in the limbic system, where the only thing that matters is survival. And we're locked into survival mode at that point in time, and whatever has kept the person safe in the past when they are triggered in this trauma, experiencing this trauma trigger, that is what they'll do again. And it's going to be some version of fight, flight, or freeze. So this is why trauma-informed care, that is a term that maybe you have heard before, is really starting to become something that people are talking about more and more and more, especially in education. This is really becoming an important thing, because a lot of the things that we might do in response to seeing someone's triggered behavior, just things that are intuitive that we might do to try to control the situation when someone is being aggressive or shutting down or whatever, those are actually things that are going to make the situation worse when the person is actually having that trigger response. So learning about trauma and then being able to act from a trauma-informed place can help us to mitigate those situations. So trauma is in every community. No one is immune to it, and it can look like a lot of different things. So this graphic here kind of just shows you what you might see. There's the iceberg, right? So we see what's above the water. What's above the water, what we see are the behaviors that are associated with someone being triggered. So we might see aggressive behavior. We might see people crying. We might see people just totally shutting down. We might see people who are very wary or distrustful. But what we don't see is what's under the surface, the mountain of ice under the water. And that's whatever trauma it is that they are carrying with them that winds up resulting in the behavior that we do see. So this is relevant for our customers, or our patrons, the folks that we are serving. But it's also relevant for us individually as well, because when we have unresolved trauma, these things happen for us too, and we might wind up in these kind of situations and not really understand what is happening, and experience those behaviors, and they almost feel like they're outside of our control. So that's a big topic, discussing trauma. And to come back from that and back into the present moment, let's do another mindfulness practice. So this one will be a little bit different. It's a modified version of a body scan practice. So again, I'll just encourage everyone to find a way that we can sit comfortably. So key things here: spine nice and tall, feet on the floor. If we're sitting in a chair, legs uncrossed, shoulders relaxed. And if it feels okay to you, just allow your eyes to close. If not, you can keep a soft gaze. That's absolutely fine. And for the next several minutes, we're going to just scan our awareness through various parts of our body, noticing what we feel and where we feel it, both on the outside or the surface of our body and from within our body. So let's begin by allowing our awareness to travel into our feet. And just make note of what you can feel in your feet. You may feel contact with the floor. You may feel clothing or shoes, air. And there may be feelings of tension from inside of the feet. There's no need to make anything happen or to judge anything that's here. We're just being curious and noticing what we notice. From this awareness, we can travel up into the legs. Just notice what you feel in the lower legs, the calves, and the shins. Noticing what you feel in the knees and the thighs. Allowing the awareness to travel up into the hips. And notice if your attention is being pulled away, or if there are feelings or stories, thoughts that are cropping up. That's completely normal. That's what minds do. And this might feel a little bit strange. And that's okay. We aren't trying to push those feelings away or those thoughts away. We're not trying to clear the mind. We're just noticing when we've been pulled away what it's like to come back to the one thing that we are paying attention to, which in this moment is the physical sensation in the area of our hips. Can move into the upper body, noticing what we notice in the stomach and in the torso. Noticing what you feel in your lower back, your middle back, your upper back, and in the entire spine. Noticing what you feel in your shoulders, down the upper arms, lower arms, wrists and hands, each individual finger. Just noticing what you feel, where you feel it, no need to change it. Noticing what you feel in your throat, in your neck, in the face, being aware of the jaw, the skin on the cheeks and the forehead, the space between the eyebrows, and the entire head and face. And finally, resting in awareness of the entire physical body. Just noticing what you feel, where you feel it. Taking one more full inhale, full exhale. And at the bottom of the exhale, blinking open the eyes. So compassion fatigue is a very real thing. And a definition that I found that I like is compassion fatigue is the emotional residue or strain of exposure to working with those suffering from the consequences of traumatic events. So if we are working with folks who are experiencing trauma, we are at risk for developing compassion fatigue. And though people who don't really understand what's happening inside of libraries in 2019 may not understand how, libraries could be encountering trauma, those of us who do understand, those of us who are having, to help families that are living in the terror of being mixed status families and fearing every day that one or more family member may suddenly be taken from them. Those of us who have had to administer Narcan or call ambulances in our libraries because of overdoses. Those of us who are helping communities that are dealing with the day-to-day struggles and challenges of living in poverty. Those are all different kinds of trauma that show up in the library. And over time, we're at risk for developing compassion fatigue, which is a real thing. This is also known as secondary trauma. So it's the trauma that we take on when we're helping others who are living with it. So these are the things to be on the lookout for in terms of recognizing compassion fatigue. How are we going to know that that's happening to us? Well, here are some of the symptoms that you might be experiencing. You might feel completely exhausted and just totally, totally worn out. That can be physically exhausted, mentally, like you're having trouble concentrating, emotionally, like you just don't have anything more to give. We can find ourselves feeling really, really overwhelmed by people's needs and difficulties, almost as though we're experiencing them ourselves, just totally overwhelmed by them. We can find that we're becoming really irritable and impatient. So we're really raw, like there's no space. We don't have that patience for anybody. We're just really quick to anger. And this can be happening both in the professional setting and, of course, in our personal lives as well, affecting those that we care about, our friends and our family. We might find that we start to feel really numb or detached. So this can affect, maybe we feel really numb in the face of the pain that people around us are experiencing, but also numb in the face of joy. So that we aren't really feeling our feelings of happiness or sadness anymore. We can have difficulty sleeping and just have these really intense dreams or intrusive thoughts of things that we have seen people experiencing. And it's important to note that those who themselves are, have unresolved trauma, they are going to be more susceptible to compassion fatigue themselves. Because if we have unresolved trauma ourselves, we're really being triggered over and over and over again. And that can help, or that leads to this exhaustion of compassion fatigue. So what can we do? How can we prevent this kind of compassion fatigue? We still love our job. This isn't burnout. Compassion fatigue is different from professional burnout. We still love our work. It's still what we want to be doing. Our passion, our zeal for it hasn't faded or gone away, but we can't access it because we're just so wiped out. Well, the way that we prevent that from happening or treat it if it is happening is through self-care, which is very purposefully and intentionally caring for our own physical, mental, and emotional well-being. Self-care is not something that just happens. It's something that we prioritize. And I think it's really interesting. Self-care is, it's a term that is kind of ubiquitous in the the culture right now. A lot of people mean different things when they say self-care. And I think it's really interesting to just kind of look back to the origins of that term. Self-care is a term that originally cropped up from the medical profession for trauma doctors, especially realizing that they had, with the intense things that they were seeing, self-care was necessary to be able to stay in the profession. But it also arose in the civil rights movement, particularly with women of color, recognizing that their physical well-being, their health, was not something that the systems that, the medical system was really prioritizing. So specific health challenges that they faced were not things that were really being cared for. And so there was this big movement to take on their own physical care within the community. So I just think it's kind of interesting to note that there's this kind of revolutionary idea of self-care. If no one else is going to do it for us or for me, but I deserve to be healthy, I deserve to be happy, and I'm going to find ways to care for myself and to care for my community. Because the reality is that we can't care for others without first caring for ourselves. That old analogy of the oxygen mask, right? We've got to put our own mask on before we can take care of others. But I think one of the things that is a real barrier to self-care is this sense that we might have, depending on how we have been socialized, that self-care is something for somebody else. It's not for us. We might have just a blockage to providing self-care because we feel that it's indulgent or selfish or for somebody else. Maybe people who are privileged can have self-care, but it's not something that's available to me. And one of the things that I would really like to see happen in the library profession is a reframing of that idea of self-care so that we can start to let go of that idea that it's selfish and actually understand it and work to cultivate it as an essential leadership skill. Strong leaders practice self-care. They recognize that they are human and that there's only so much that they can give, and they know what to do for themselves to refill their battery, and they do it. And that's what allows them to come back to the workplace, come back to whatever their passion in life is with that renewed energy that lets them stay in it for the long term. So I'd love to get just a quick scan of the group. How do you all currently practice self-care? And if you don't currently practice self-care in any way, you can make note of that as well. So once again, to share in this, we'll use the questions pane, and you can just type in your answer and Mary will read them out for me.
Someone says running.
Great.
Someone else is saying they don't, but they would like to learn. Meditation, yoga,
Let's see if we can get like 2 more.
music, bubble baths, hobbies, hikes, and prayer.
Great. Thank you all so much for sharing those practices. Let's come back into another mindfulness practice, connecting with the present moment as it is. So this is a practice that involves our senses. We really invite in the sensory experience. So we'll begin as we have with all of our other practices, our little mindfulness breaks that we've been taking throughout this session. So allow yourself to find that comfortable seat once again, scooting forward in your chair so that your spine can be tall, legs uncrossed, feet on the floor, shoulders relaxed. And we'll begin this time with our eyes open. So with your eyes open, you're invited to make note to yourself of 5 things that you can see right now. So just name 5 things that you can see in your field of vision in this current moment. And then you're invited to softly close the eyes if that feels okay to you. And now allow your awareness to open up and name to yourself 4 things that you can hear. These may be sounds in the room, sound of my voice, sounds from within your body. Just noticing and noting 4 things that you can hear right now. Now noticing 3 things that you can feel with your sense of touch right now in this present moment. Can relax into it. We don't have to search frantically. We can just observe these things as they pop up. 3 things that we can feel with our sense of touch. Now noticing 2 things that you can smell or taste in the current moment. And finally, making note of 1 thing for which you feel gratitude right here and right now. And if the eyes have been closed, we can softly blink them open. So there are a multitude of ways that we can practice self-care. This is not a one-size-fits-all type of a deal. The ways of practicing self-care will be as varied as we are individuals. One way of practicing self-care is through the practice of mindfulness. And that is something that I have been embedding throughout our time together today. We've had little snippets of mindfulness practice and will continue to do so, because mindfulness is one of the ways of practicing self-care that is really being studied by the research community, that is shown over and over and over again to be a very, very powerful practice for people who have experienced trauma and are healing from trauma, as well as people who are susceptible to compassion fatigue and secondary trauma because of their work. So, for example, my husband is a psychiatric nurse, and one of the things that his hospital does is they provide on-site drop-in meditation and yoga practice that is mindfulness-based stress reduction, actually on-site for nurses, because that is certainly one of the fields that is susceptible to compassion fatigue, and there's so much research that shows how beneficial it is. So mindfulness is the practice of connecting with the present moment as it is. We move out of the stories about the future, the memories from the past, and connect to the present moment. And I've done a webinar for info people in the past on mindfulness that goes more in depth than that. And I believe that you can access that archived version for free. So that's something to check out if you're interested in learning more. But there are many other ways to practice self-care as well. So a lot of people in the when we were just hearing from the group and how people practice self-care, we're naming different kinds of physical activity. And that's an excellent, excellent way to practice self-care. It's so great for us physically, but it's also so great for us physiologically and in terms of our brain chemistry as well. There are different neurotransmitters and hormones that are produced when we exercise that help us to feel good and help us to combat stress. So there's lots of different ways that we can do that. We can make time to be with people who support us, people who understand us and make us feel heard. There are lots of creative things that we can do. Somebody said music, writing, dance, art. Time in nature can be really restorative for practicing self-care. Of course, there's lots of therapeutic techniques that can help us, that are ways that we can practice self-care. So aromatherapy, Reiki, massage, things like that. And also therapy, especially if we know that we ourselves have unresolved trauma and are finding ourselves being triggered in the workplace, and really having strong reactions to things that are happening in the workplace, then therapy is a really helpful way that we can care for ourselves and start to heal. So self-care really is about finding what is going to work for you and then actually doing it. And this is where the barriers come in, right? Because I think it's easy, maybe easy-ish, to identify things that maybe make you feel good or things that you like to do, that help fill your battery, fill your cup, keep you going. But it's so easy to just, you know, have all of these barriers. Oh, I can't afford it. Oh, I don't have enough time. Oh, who will watch the kids? All of those kinds of things that can make it hard for us to ever get started on our path to self-care, and also can make it hard to stick with it if we do get started. So I just want to acknowledge that those barriers are real. But it's possible to strategize and find ways around them. So, if something is, something that we really want to do has a cost associated with it, are there, free options anywhere in your area? If we, are feeling like we don't have any support, can we sit down and talk to a friend or a family member about what's going on and try to build in some support so that we can actually make this something that we stick to, something that's in our weekly schedule or our daily schedule. And then, of course, there can be issues of just physically accessing the things that we want to do. But of course, now with the internet, there are all kinds of things that we can find that can bring practices close to home. So if we want to do yoga, but there's not a yoga studio in our town, there are lots of great resources online for starting a practice. So the barriers are real. And anytime that you start a new habit or new healthy habit, those barriers are going to crop up. Your mind is going to want to preserve the status quo, and it's going to start creating a bunch of stories about why you can't do this new thing. And we just have to know to expect that, and then strategize for what we're going to do to overcome it. Just because the barrier shows up doesn't mean that we have to let it stop us. So let's talk about how we can support self-care in the workplace, because yes, it is something that we do individually, right? Like nobody can take care of my health but me. That includes my emotional health, my physical health, etc. So it is up to me to get it going. However, there are things that workplaces can do that can help make self-care more available to employees. And that is really important for a workplace to think about, if we want to sustain people for the long term. And we don't want to see our awesome employees just completely running out of steam because of compassion fatigue. Especially because if our staff are experiencing compassion fatigue, that's really indicative that our community needs them. Our community needs the services and the resources that we're providing. So we got to keep them in the game. So no matter what level of employment we have, whether we're in a supervisory role or front lines, entry level, behind the scenes, wherever we are, one thing that we can do is we can actually lead by example. We can make our commitment to self-care and actually stick to it. And, that will be, the way that affects us in the workplace will be something that will be a noticeable example to others. I think it's a really great idea for organizations to start actually naming compassion fatigue and talking about it openly. Because when something has a name, then it's just there's all of the symptoms of it maybe are less scary to address. We know what it is instead of just feeling like, what is going on with me? I can't concentrate on anything. I feel numb. I'm irritated all the time. Maybe I just hate my job now. Maybe I need to quit. Like what is going on with me? But if we name it and we know what compassion fatigue is and we're talking about it and we're on the lookout for those signs and symptoms, then we can prevent it and we can do something about it when it does happen. We can help take care of each other. We can encourage our staff to actually take their breaks, take their vacations, use their time off. You aren't useful to me as an employer if you are running on fumes. So please go take your time, recharge, encourage people to do that rather than encouraging people to constantly be self-sacrificing. We can treat mental health and physical health on the same level within the workplace. So if someone has to call in for a sick day, it's none of our business why they are sick or what that means. It's not our business if they have a cold or if they are just completely overridden with anxiety or, mentally exhausted and need a break. Someone, sick is sick, whether it's mental or physical, and mental health is physical health. Mentorship is really key. I think that we're really, really susceptible to things like compassion fatigue when we're at the entry level positions, and when we're young and enthusiastic and idealistic and new to the profession. So people who are more established within the profession can really help that next generation by reaching out to them and making sure that they're taking care of themselves and understanding that that is an important leadership skill to cultivate as they grow in their profession. And of course, we can't do that. We can't mentor effectively if we are, teetering on the brink of burnout ourselves too. So mentorship really forces us to lead by example. I think it's really important to know the actual demands of the job and make sure that we're checking in on our staff. Because if we are removed in our position and in our, there's departments, right? There are different areas of responsibility. Work in lots of workplaces, including libraries, is kind of segmented. So we may be responsible for a lot of employees, but not really truly understand what those employees are facing on a day-to-day basis. We may not see the trauma that's coming in the doors and see the situations that the library staff are having to diffuse with people who have these challenges. So it's important to get a real sense of what is actually happening in the library and check in on your staff regularly. And if some jobs are really, really, really demanding, there may be some times that we need to swap people around and move people out so that they can get a little bit of a break from those demanding and stressful positions or locations. We can also provide some sort of on-site training, or some sort of actual opportunities for self-care within the organization. And so kind of put our money where our mouth is to help make sure that staff have the ways to take care of themselves. And then finally, we can really make sure that we're being careful of what behaviors that we reward. It's one thing if we are telling staff, it's really important for you to take your breaks. It's important for you to take care of yourself. It's important for you to practice self-care. And then, the people who are getting, opportunities to serve on committees or promotions or, interesting assignments or whatever are folks who are, just the behaviors of what you're rewarding, people who are taking work home and working off the clock and working through their breaks and all this and that. That sends a message that is contrary to the professed message of self-care, in terms of just what we're rewarding from staff behavior. So I just like to encourage everybody, we won't actually share on this one, but to take some time and actually think a little bit about what it is that we have going on in the workplace that we could maybe let go of. So, there are lots of things that this could be. We don't have to search too hard for it, but just look at what bubbles up for you. Is there something that you are doing, that you are taking on in the workplace that is not serving your self-care? And would it be possible to let go of that habit? And then what does that feel like to think about that? So the handout that I have prepared for you all is a self-care plan. It's a strategy to help you actually note what is causing you stress, what you're experiencing in your body, heart, and mind when you encounter these major stressors in the workplace, what it is that brings you joy, that fills your cup, that helps you rebuild the energy that you need in your workplace, and how you can create a way to actually prioritize and make a commitment to working in that kind of self-care into your life on a regular basis. So it's something that I encourage you to take the time to work on thoughtfully. And then once you do, actually give it a try and see what starts to shift for you by prioritizing self-care in your life. It might be an interesting experiment to go through that plan and then come back and do it again a month later and just note, or 2 months later, whatever timeline, and just notice what has shifted or started to change for you. So I'd love, before we close our time out, for everyone to think about one commitment that they could make. What is one thing that you could actually commit to doing that will elevate your self-care or elevate the culture of self-care within your workplace? So when you have an idea, if you'll type that in the questions pane, and Mary can share that with us as they come in. Do we have anything coming in?
Let's see, just have something coming in.
Okay.
Think about what I can let go of at work.
We'll give it about another minute, see if we can get some other ideas.
Here we go. Attend exercise classes more consistently. Make time for me. Take my breaks.
Great. All right.
Oh, one more here.
Sure.
Talk to my staff about self-care and compassion fatigue.
Great. So I'm going to close us out with one more mindfulness practice that actually helps us to develop compassion for ourselves and for others, and then we'll open things up for some questions. So as we have done with all of the other practices, I encourage you to find a comfortable seat. Allow your spine to be nice and tall, shoulders relaxed. And if it feels okay to you, you're invited to close the eyes. And we'll begin just by connecting first with feeling our body breathe. As long as we are alive, we're breathing, so we don't need any fancy equipment or special training or anything in particular to be able to connect with our breath. And if we're watching our breath, really being with the experience of our breath, we can't be anywhere but in the present moment, as this breath is only happening right here and right now. So after feeling yourself breathe for a few moments, we'll let our awareness settle into the space of our heart. So the place in your body where you feel feelings of kindness and tenderness for others. And letting our awareness settle into that space, we'll repeat a series of phrases silently to ourselves. And each time that we do so, we can think about dropping these phrases into the space of our heart, kind of like we would drop a pebble into like a wishing well, and just feeling whatever ripples out as we do this. We'll begin by offering these phrases first to ourselves. So in the space of your heart, see or feel yourself as clearly as you can, and silently say to yourself, may I be happy, may I be healthy, may I be safe, may I live with ease. Really feeling what it's like to send these statements of well-being to ourselves and receive them fully. May I be happy. May I be healthy. May I be safe. May I live with ease. And we can let the image of ourselves dissolve and bring into the space of our heart someone for whom it's effortless to feel feelings of love and kindness, perhaps a child or a pet or a dear friend. See this person, feel this person as clearly as you can in the space of your heart, and silently offer these phrases to them. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you be safe. May you live with ease. Allowing the sense of this person to fade, and invite now into the space of your heart someone who is challenging for you. Perhaps a patron or a customer who you find difficult, or a coworker. And sense this person as clearly as you can in the space of your heart, knowing that like you and like your loved ones, this person is human, and they long to feel happy, they long for safety, they long for love, just like all of us. So silently offering these phrases out to that person. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you be safe. May you live with ease. And finally, inviting into the space of our heart all beings everywhere, including ourselves. May we all be happy. May we all be healthy. May we all be safe. May we all live with ease. And feel One more full inhale and exhale. The bottom of your exhale, you're invited to blink open the eyes if they're still closed. And I am happy to take any questions that there might be from the group.
Not any questions yet, but someone had also added that they were planning to spend more time in nature.
Great.
Oh, that was a good one.
Yeah. The key really is to keep after it. Whatever it is that we do, just don't just do it once, find whatever it is that's going to work for you and do it regularly. It's that preventative measure.
And someone is asking, is the webinar going to be archived? And yes, it is. And everyone who registered for the webinar today will get an email tomorrow, and it'll have that link to the recording. Alrighty, I'm not seeing any other questions or comments.
Okay. Well, thank you all so much. It's been a pleasure, and I hope that this is useful to you. Please don't hesitate to be in touch if you have questions or concerns, or if there's anything else I can do.
We did have one question, of course. After I say that, there's always a question that comes up. How do you deal with the guilt from self-care?
Oh, what a wonderful question. That's a process, right? That's going to be something that's going to be a process. And I think for me, I think that it is very helpful to switch the narrative. The understanding that this is essential. This is a leadership skill for me to be good at my job, for me to be good at being a partner, or being somebody who's taking care of others in my family. This is the foundation of what is a requirement. It's like the minimum requirement to be able to complete that job. So for me, I find that reframing is really, really helpful. I would definitely suggest that if anyone is finding that they aren't able to reframe, or even with that reframing, they're still really suffering from feelings of guilt, like especially if you're suffering so much from guilt that you aren't even able to enjoy whatever it is that you're prioritizing for your self-care, that would be indicative of a need to go talk to somebody professionally. So I would really recommend looking into, if your workplace provides an EAP or anything like that, and maybe just talking to someone to work through that.
And then the same person has followed up and said, my daughter said just yesterday that I should treat myself as someone else and take care of her like I do others.
Yes, I love that. That is such a great tip for sure. That's one that I have learned as well. The idea of when you catch yourself like really giving yourself a hard time or berating yourself, just being like, wait a second, would I say this to my best friend? Would I say this to my loved one? Why, I'm going to be a good friend to myself. But I will say that sometimes it's those things, those suggestions, those bits of advice, they're great, but sometimes they are easier said than done. So yeah, I know that I should be nice to myself, but I still am unable to do it, So if that's a thing that is coming up for anybody, again, that's just, that I would say, like, please don't ever be afraid to unpack some of the blockages that might have been passed on to you or socialized into you with a professional, because with a little bit of work, you can work through some of that stuff and then suddenly be able to have a totally different way of relating to yourself in life.
Right. And someone said their staff is going to be having staff day, and they're going to learn more about how to deal compassionately with their homeless population. And this person is looking forward to adding some of these tips for self-care. So thank you.
Awesome. I'm really glad to hear that. Look and see what kind of resources are available in your local community that you could invite in to actually give people some self-care opportunities. Bring in chair massage or something.
We're going to do one more question. How do
Okay.
you deal with imposter syndrome, feeling not genuine, helping others, but not able to help myself?
That's really interesting. I haven't heard of imposter syndrome being in this particular context. Um, I don't know that I have an answer for that. I would say that maybe every day is an opportunity to start again. So just remember that. So maybe up until this point, you've been really giving a lot to others and have not been able to, let's say, practice what you preach or make the space or the time for yourself. Okay, that's how it's been up till now. That doesn't mean that that's who you are. That doesn't mean that you are locked in that pattern of behavior forever. Every single day, literally every single moment is a new opportunity to start again. So, for whatever that's worth, growth mindset. You can always be learning new skills. You can always be growing. You can always be changing over time.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Katie, for another
Of
great
course,
webinar.
of
I always feel
course.
so relaxed after your webinars. That's awesome.
Great. I hope everybody else does too, and I hope you have a great day. Thanks,
So
everyone.